Back in 2016, amidst the rise of FNaF and Scratch, one game in particular arose above the others. That was a spark. The Sparks was released on June 26, 2016 by the developer Diamond Fox 9579, who is now known as Foxlo. Foxlo's old stuff is pretty difficult to find since his Scratch accounts are just gone, and so are all the products he had shared on them. Thankfully, lots of people loved his games and archived most of them before they disappeared. However, some of them are genuinely lost media, such as his 2015 games, of which there was a whole series of the Sparks made before the ones commonly known today, and only their thumbnails can be found on the Wayback Machine. Enough about that, let's get on to the first game, the Sparks. The first Sparks game is well known for the famous Biscuit Dog video covering the game with almost 150,000 views on YouTube. The game features some pretty impressive graphics for 2016, with character models that still, in a way, hold up even today, as well as environmental art that actually looks quite nice. Unfortunately, most of this environmental art isn't utilized well anyways, as the cameras are almost obsolete in this game. The gameplay of the Sparks is rough, and that's a theme we're going to see in a few of these games, especially the next one. The Sparks gameplay is very simple. Shut the light off when somebody attacks the office, and reset Blazer every once in a while. Unfortunately, the hours are quite long as well, so the gameplay very quickly becomes slow and boring, and less of a case of watching the animatronics approach the office to correctly time your defenses, but more of a, oh, he's there, let me click this button. Thankfully for us, there's more gameplay besides the main nights. Hard mode is unlocked after beating the main night, and luckily for us it's a lot more active than the main night. Gameplay wise, it's the same mechanics you're dealing with, however now everybody moves a lot faster, and whilst this is fairly refreshing in comparison to the main night, it isn't actually changing much. You just get to shut the light off faster. So overall, the game is just It's iconic and memorable, but its gameplay is not, which drags down the experience a ton. Now onto the second game, the Sparks 2. I actually quite like the models here, the damage is applied fairly well on them and they look pretty menacing. The problem with this game, however, is also the gameplay, and if the Sparks gameplay sounded bad, oh boy, this game is far worse. If you see a character, press their button. If you hear Blazer, press his button. And just for good measure, you can reboot all if you want, even though there's no cooldown for rebooting any other characters alone. When I say this gameplay blows, I mean it blows. The characters aren't very active in the main night either, so combining that with the painfully long night length is just irredeemable. The hard mode of this game is just faster, but otherwise not at all noteworthy. Despite all this, I actually have a bit of a sweet spot for this game. Yeah, it stinks, no kidding, but it was the game that acted as a blueprint for my first FNaF fan game back in August 2020, One Night at Gray's. And since it's inspired by the Sparks 2, you can safely assume that the gameplay sucks there as well. Anyways, on to the next game. The Sparks Remastered is a game that I thought I'd mention now. It's a remake of the Sparks 1 with improved visuals and somewhat improved gameplay. I wouldn't say the gameplay is amazing in the Sparks Remastered, but it introduces a few new mechanics that are pretty nice to see. These mechanics are a vent camera with a vent that can be toggled, an electric shock for Wooly in the cameras, and a camera recharge. All of these mechanics together actually do add some more maintenance to the gameplay, which is very much needed, so in that case it is nice. The artwork is also better, which is a pretty good thing considering the art throughout the series is good as a whole in most cases. That's all I really have to say for this game though, it's a nice upgrade to the Sparks. Now, before I get onto the Sparks 3, I was actually told by an individual named Kat whilst researching for this video that they had the files to the original Sparks 3, the original from 2015, which was previously assumed to be completely lost to time, and so we have to check it out. Booting up the game, we see this menu with a very different type of model to that of which we're used to seeing with Foxlo's other Sparks games. This was his early bitmap phase, before the vector art that we see in these other games, and the quality really shows. They look pretty rough, but also quite iconic. It reminds me of Hitu's older models. As for the gameplay of Sparks 3 2015, oh, right. You see, the Sparks 3 is a 2.0 game, since it dropped before 2019, and whilst the other games we've looked at in this video are also 2.0 games, this one is coded significantly worse and therefore doesn't really run. Unfortunately, 2.0 games sometimes translate pretty bad into 3.0, and even after running the game in 2.0, which I did do, the file I was given was already on SP3, which meant it was already kind of broken. Either way, it's still crazy to see this game up close. Before I was given the file, I only knew of the game from Wayback Machine archives on Foxzo's old profile, where you could see thumbnails. The next game on our list is The Sparks 3, not the 2015 one. This game introduces some new characters besides the main four, such as Milo, the cover character for the game, and Locksuit, which is our Springtrap it seems. Hopping right into the game, it's actually got more gameplay than the Sparks 1 and the Sparks 2. There's now multiple mechanics and ways to deal with characters that helps to make it a bit more interesting. Is the gameplay good though? Well, it's fine. For Milo, you need to hide under the desk when he arrives, a fairly simple mechanic though it is nice to differentiate from other characters. For Locksuit, you have to stand still, not hide, and not use the cameras whilst he watches you from the side of the office. If you do, it's game over. Again, it isn't crazy, but it's nice that you don't have to repeat the same mechanic as Milo for him. As for Spark, he'll appear on one of your cameras messing around with the oxygen tanks, and you'll just need to shock him. Willy is basically the same, except he messes around in a different room. The gameplay, as I said, is fine, it just isn't the most interesting loop. It's certainly better than the Sparks 1 and 2 though. The models here are even more destroyed than they were in the Sparks 2, with the exception of Milo and Locksuit. The design quality certainly gets better as the games continue, which is also nice to see. That's all I really have to say for the Sparks 3, let's continue on. The Sparks 4 is a pretty major switch in the series. Here the game takes place in a bedroom, like FNaF 4, instead of the restaurant locations of the previous games. The general design of specifically the characters here is starkly different to those of the previous games. They take very clear inspiration from the nightmare animatronics in FNaF 4, which actually pays off pretty well in Foxzo's models. Gameplay wise, it's very similar to FNaF 4. You can flash your light down a hallway, out a window, or into a closet, and if somebody is there, shut the door. Many sparks will begin to accumulate on the bed, and you can press a button on your iPad to get rid of them. There's also a minigame between nights akin to fun with Plushtrap, but for some reason, whilst recording gameplay for this video, I couldn't get it right, despite having done so flawlessly other times, I promise. Unfortunately, the gameplay loop isn't too advanced, but it at least involves having to visit several parts of the room instead of one. The game does have a fair few bugs that can drag it down a fair bit, a prime example being that if you hold your flashlight whilst moving away from an entrance to your room, the flashlight will still be activated despite not normally being able to do so in the main area of your bedroom. It kinda just removes the shading from the room, which looks awkward and improper in the game. This one's only a visual bug though, and whilst recording I stumbled upon another bug here that just completely derailed the game. That's all I've really got to say for the Sparks 4, so on to the next game. The Sparks sister location is a pretty niche Sparks game, at least I think, since I never hear discussion about it. It only features office gameplay, not any of the typical sister location gameplay, but that's not really a problem. Some of the characters have multiple functions, such as Spark either attacking with his bonbon, which then goes to the vents and requires that you use an audio lure, or he may go to your left window, in which case you can just shock him. Sparkles can go to your right window and you shock her, or she can go to your oxygen and you must instead shock her there on the cameras. The multiple mechanics for these characters makes it more challenging, but also pretty cool that you have to actually watch them on the cameras to see where they're headed. I didn't play very much of this game, and I kinda got screwed over by Sparks' plush attacking at the same time as Sparkles, which ended my run, but I think the gameplay in the Sparks' location is actually good. I also neglected to mention that these repairs that you can do on your systems are a nice little touch that doesn't take away anything from the gameplay. Now here's a Sparks game you might not know about, the Sparks Final Chapter. I do remember playing this game before FNaF Scratch account was deleted, so I'm happy to see it was archived despite how niche it was, I think. The game presents you with colors for each character which can be seen on your monitor. There are also some other characters that are not linked to a color on the monitor. Whilst I was playing this game, I got attacked by a bunch of characters at the same time and tried to put on my mask. And then I tried to click their color buttons, but I died. I don't really know what's going on here, but I'm sure there's a proper way to deal with this situation. I'm just not really bothered to figure it out. Besides that, this game is evidently difficult. It might be a bit harder than Sister Location, but I can't be 100% sure as I didn't play enough of either game to rate them in such a way. That's all I really have to say about the Sparks Final Chapter, so let's move on to the next games. From this point onwards, Foxzo's Sparks games would have a very evident increase in quality as he got better as an artist. Unfortunately, there aren't many games to show for this era, but we'll take what we've got. First up is the Sparks Deadwire. As far as I'm aware, I don't think this game was finished, but it does have a playable build with decent content. The first thing I have to say about this game is wow. The graphics are really good, the map design is a bit generic, but still impressive nonetheless, and the animatronics look great. The gameplay is iffy. Characters are introduced progressively as the night goes on, starting with Spark. The mechanics are fairly simple, for example with the door, which can only be shut for an incredibly short time before it reopens on a cooldown, so you must shut it right as somebody appears, no pre-firing. The most unique mechanic in the game is probably Wooly, who goes to one of your power rooms and shuts off half the cameras if you can't shock him in time, but that alone is still pretty simple. The gameplay is sort of justified with the pacing though, since everybody is quite fast and more characters are gradually added in as the hours pass. That being said, it's also pretty difficult. There's not much breathing space and one small mistake will lead to a jump scare. I don't think this game is bad. It's got great visuals, the sound design works, and the difficulty is fairly balanced. The biggest issue I could find is the lack of content, since there's only 4 characters whose mechanics blend into each other a bit, and only one night just with a normal and expert mode. Now this is a Sparks game you may have heard of, Scrap Show. This is the last official Sparks game from Fox though, but unfortunately it was cancelled. There are existing builds where you can look around and stuff, but no actual progression or enemies. There's 2 of these that I looked at. I can't verify the officiality of any of these builds. Look at these builds and visually the game is really beautiful. The art style of Fox though is very detailed and flashy, which really goes to show in these builds, whether they're real or not. I really can't say much about this game, and I can't rate its difficulty either since it's not very playable. And with that are all the Foxo Sparks games for this video. Foxo doesn't really go by that username anymore, but instead Kangapoo on multiple platforms. For simplicity, I'll use the name Foxo still. He still frequently draws artworks that's really cool actually, but he has quit working on FNaF fan games altogether. In a now deleted post, he stated that he didn't wish to work on FNaF fan games at all anymore, although in a more recent post officially announcing Scrap Show was cancelled, which I think we all knew, Foxo said that he is constantly going back and forth about whether he wishes to keep making FNaF content or not. Only time will tell whether he does continue making FNaF content. On another note, the rights to the Sparks are apparently owned now by a username Aesthetic. Unfortunately, there's not very much to show here since both his Spark games are on hiatus, but perhaps he'll return someday. Let's take a look at the Sparks Resurrected, the one public game made by this developer. The opening cutscene in this game has some interesting dialogue that I wasn't a huge fan of, but that's fine. As for the gameplay, the whole area looks a fair bit nicer than the Sparks, and the characters are expressive as all. But the gameplay is questionable. By questionable, I mean that I was asking a lot of questions whilst playing this because nothing is ever explained. Of course the light switch is the same as it was in the original, but Blaz's area now has a charge that works sort of like a music box and is never explained. And Wooly will just teleport into your office and block your light switch for who knows how long, resulting in a death from another character. I couldn't figure out what was causing this issue, so I just stopped playing the game here. That's all I have to say for this game. Overall, the Sparks games aren't all too bad. Just a few of them are, and some are alright or mediocre. They certainly excel in artwork, though the gameplay is usually flat and the sound design could be better. I hope you've learned something cool today about this series. Thanks for watching.